In the US President Joe Biden says his trip to Ireland starting today will underscore the United States' commitment to peace and prosperity. He is due to arrive in Belfast later today to mark the 25th anniversary of the so-called Good Friday Agreement, which secured a fragile peace between warring Catholic and Protestant communities in Northern Ireland. Now, the American president will hold talks with the United Kingdom Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and will meet representatives from all 5 of Northern Ireland's main political parties. Now, our chief correspondent John Cookson looks back at Northern Ireland's troubled past.
Irish Republican dissidents marched through the streets of Londonderry, marking the 107th anniversary of the 1916 Easter Uprising, a key moment in the Irish Revolution against British rule. While an entire generation has grown up without the fear of violence, divisions remain over the conflict's legacy. A dozen or so Catholic youths firebomb a police car monitoring the protest. No officers were injured in the attack during an otherwise peaceful demonstration. And mercifully, in the last 25 years, there's been no return to the bad old days or the Troubles as they were known.
The agreement was the beginning of a new journey, but at least we had a mechanism for people to have their say, which then allowed us to argue that there was no need for armed actions or no need for violence, that this was the way to go forward.
Not that there aren't strong undercurrents of dissent.
So long as you continue to oppress us, you will meet with the inescapable consequences. Historically, oppression breeds resistance, so I quote Maura Drum. It isn't enough to shout up the IRA. The important thing is to join the IRA.
Northern Ireland was and still is split between 2 main communities, nationalists, most of them Catholic, who want union with the rest of Ireland, and largely Protestant unionists who want to stay British.
That we're going to carry this battle to every end of this province until the day shall come when the Union Jack shall fly on every street and on every road.
More than 3,500 people died in the so-called Troubles, not only in Ireland, but the Irish Republican Army came very close to assassinating the then British Prime Minister in a bombing of a hotel which killed 5. The Good Friday Accord in 1988, which brought peace, was partly brokered by the Clinton administration.
For 25 years now, the history of Northern Ireland has been written in the blood of its children and their parents. The ceasefire turned the page on that history. It must not be allowed to turn back.
In 2023, tensions remain between the 2 main communities, with fortified peace walls separating some nationalist and unionist neighbourhoods. A growing number of people identify as neither unionist nor nationalist these days, but Northern Ireland's short-term governance and long-term future are both unresolved. John Cookson, Arise News.
And John Cookson joins us now from London for more. Good day, very warm welcome to Newsday, John. Let's get straight into it, as we always do. Of course, we know that the US president has a packed schedule over the next 4 days. Can you give us a little bit more insight about his trip?
Hi guys, great to be on Newsday as always. Well, yes, President Biden, very busy schedule. He leaves Washington in about an hour from now, just over an hour from now, for the 6-hour flight to Belfast, landing at around 7 p.m., something like that, London and Nigeria time. At some point, he'll have bilateral talks with the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and as you said in the intro, he'll be meeting the 5 main parties in Northern Ireland. Next day is perhaps a much more enjoyable part of the trip for Biden, something he's apparently been looking forward to for a long time. He's going to his family's ancestral home in County Louth, which lies between Belfast and Dublin. His great-great-great-grandfather, Owen Finnegan, was born there and left in 1850, as many Irish did because of the potato famine, and emigrated to America. So an emotional visit there for Biden. Same day he arrives in the capital of Republic of Ireland, Dublin, where he'll meet with the President of Ireland, Mr. Higgins, and also with the Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar. And on Thursday, he'll address the Houses of Parliament in Dublin. So, as I say, a busy schedule for President Biden. Part of it business, part of it politics, but much of it, I think, a sentimental journey for him.
All right, sentimental, you say. But John, the divisions remain in Northern Ireland. What good will the Biden visit do to help both communities?
That's a very good question, and I suppose it depends on which part of the political and religious divide you sit on this. I mean, American presidents are perceived by the Protestant majority community in Northern Ireland as being pro-Catholic, and to that extent, this visit is not as important to the Protestant community as it is to the Catholic community in Northern Ireland, indeed in Ireland itself. So I think the best that can be said is that the power sharing government collapsed in 2021, and the parties have not met together completely together since then. So this informal gathering with Biden will at least draw the opposing political parties together in the same room at the same time. And I'm sure at some point there'll be some promise of money and investment by Biden from the US in various communities to help try to keep the peace and keep things rolling along in Northern Ireland. But it's a tricky mission for Biden, because the Protestants, when they feel as if they're being pushed by an American president, they can tend to rebel against it. So he's got to take some very delicate steps here when talking to parties like the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party.
Right, and thank you for shedding a little bit more light on some of the intricacies of these parties coming together. Of course, we know the Northern Ireland power sharing government hasn't met for over a year. Now, besides some of the issues that you've raised, what are the major problems that need to be overcome?
The biggest problem, I think, is the effect of Brexit. Now, in the original Brexit deal, which was negotiated by Boris Johnson, without going into too much of the weeds of all of this, for exports from the United Kingdom mainland to Northern Ireland, there was a technical customs post in the Irish Sea. Now, the very prospect of that was an anathema to the unionists in Northern Ireland, who saw themselves, and possibly quite rightly, as being cut off from the UK mainland. Now, since then, and last month was the so-called Windsor Accord, which addresses this particular problem. And again, without going into all the details of this, what is being proposed by the Sunak government and is yet to be accepted by the Democratic Unionist Party, is that goods destined for Northern Ireland only go into a green channel on export. In other words, the customs post, the technical customs post in the North Sea is scrapped. Now, the Democratic Unionist Party haven't accepted yet. They want some fine-tuning. So to that extent, I think there can be some optimism, but again, anything to do with Northern Ireland and the communities there is such a delicate issue that it's going to take some very careful negotiation for the unionists to accept it.
All right, unionists to accept it, but let's talk about the long-term prospects for peace in Northern Ireland.
You know, I am optimistic. I'm old enough to have travelled to Northern Ireland as a journalist many times during the Troubles, when bombings by the IRA and murders by both Catholics and Protestants devastated the communities in Northern Ireland. And some dreadful things happened. In fact, 3,500 people were murdered during a few decades of trouble during the 60s, the 70s, and the 1980s. But now, guys, there's a new generation, the so-called peace generation, who have known none of this. Belfast itself and other Northern Ireland towns and communities are relatively prosperous. They live in peace, and although you have still a wall separating communities in Belfast, overall, generally speaking, Northern Ireland is not a bad place to live at the moment. So although at least 100 people have been murdered since the Good Friday Accord was signed, generally speaking, things are much better than they were 30, 40, 50 years ago. So for that reason, I'm optimistic. It would help if the power-sharing government could, possibly as a result of this trip by Biden, get together and start governing Northern Ireland, because at the moment there's no government. It's ruled effectively from London. If that happens, and if this issue over Brexit can be resolved, then I think that the future is good.
Right, well, we certainly do latch on to your optimism about this. That's Arise Chief Correspondent John Cookson. Thank you so much for your time.